Hi, I'm Lee Colan, leadership advisor and author. And on today's show, we're going to talk about how you can take simple truths that are timely yet timeless to really engage the hearts and minds of your team. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business, your life, that changes absolutely everything. To find out more about us and what we do, you can go to FullMontyLeadership.com. Let me ask you, in what ways do you need to up-level your leadership? Well, here's something to consider. Despite this year's, this month's, this week's, this minute's leadership trends, have you considered that there are certain timely and timeless messages, certain timely and timeless tools that you need as a human being that could upgrade your leadership and loyalty? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes in our Facebook and LinkedIn groups by looking for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you tune into podcasts. And as always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. You can also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, regular viewer, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying play Dov Baron podcast. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, there's always a new trend, right? There's always somebody coming at you with something new that you're supposed to do. The fact is that there are certain things that you need to do and certain ways you need to be in order to be a great leader who elicits massive amounts of loyalty. Well, what are they? That's the question. Well, let's find out together. Our guest on this episode is Lee Colan. Now, Lee has been serving leaders for over 20 years. His firm equips and encourages leaders at every possible level. Lee's practical models resonate with leaders who are working in an information-rich and a time-poor world. He is an organizational psychologist and an advisor to America's leading companies. He was nominated for the top management thinker globally by Thinkers 50. In addition to serving his clients, Lee also serves on the board of Pacific Seafood, the largest seafood company in North America. He has authored no less than 15 popular leadership books and has been translated into 10 languages. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome Lee Colan!
Thank you, Dov. Best intro ever. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, mate. Good to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
How you feeling today?
Doing wonderful. We've got a great day ahead of us, so we're loving it. So love to be able to do stuff like this with you. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Well, where we like to start our show, always like to start our show, is in this world of influence and influencers and thought leaders and all these silly titles. I always like to ask my guests who's been a major influence in your life that we may or may not know, somebody we may not even suspect we may never have heard of. Who's been a really big impact on your life?
Well, I'll give you two different people. One is Ken Blanchard and Margie Blanchard, of course, from 1 Minute Manager, and built a wonderful firm. They've been a great role model for my wife and I, who co-founded our firm 20 years ago. So they've just set a great example of two equal partners, not one subordinate to the other, and great thinkers and thought leaders, and their just their approach and how they serve others has really been an inspiration for us. Another person is my kind of a mentor, friend, and publisher of many of my books, a guy named David Cottrell, best-selling author in his own right. And he always would ask me when I'd send him a draft, I'd think I was done, and I was excited to kind of just finish up the book, and he'd say, "Lee, is that your best work?" And then it would always kind of create pause and go, that would sting. But he's just been a great friend and mentor and inspiration for me also, David Cottrell.
So that's interesting, particularly with David there, because I've always said that real friends are not the people who pat us on the back.
That's right.
They don't own smoke machines to blow up our skirt. They own the truth.
Right.
And they're always calling us to that higher level. So I love that he asked you that question. That is so cool. And Ken, I don't know Ken's wife, but Ken is a great guy. I spoke on stage with Ken last year at an event for servant leaders, and it's a you know, I mean,
it's the real deal. The real deal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny because off stage he's an old man.
Yeah.
And on stage
he turns it on, doesn't he?
On stage it's like, what the hell happened? Was there some transformation there or what? And I see that a lot with speakers. I see that there's something that, particularly with a real speaker, about stepping up to serve. Right. Suddenly there's a whole new level of energy. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, we find that the most gifted speakers really, when they're up on stage, their mindset is, I'm out there to serve the audience and make sure they get the right experience from this versus it's my performance, right? And Ken embodies that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where I really wanted to go with this conversation was a place, because you and I had this conversation, and we had talked about leadership. We talked about loyalty. Obviously, that's the name of the show.
Right.
You have a wonderful, let's just use the word superficially simple. And I mean that on purpose because it's easy to grasp.
Right.
But there's great depth to it, and that's why I say superficially simple. Because you have this wonderful model of engagement where you talk about the three things that we as leaders need to do to engage mind, but also separately to engage another three things that are separately to engage hearts.
Right.
I really wanted to make our show to be focused in on that today. I really wanted to look at that because I think that is such a powerful piece. So looking at walk us through the 3 and 3, and then we'll go back over them if that's okay with you.
And that's great. I'm glad you chose to do that because it really embodies kind of the simplicity. I always tell people I'm a pretty simple-minded guy. So we just try to take leadership challenges and figure out what's the simplest solution between A and B, because we could create a graph of how to engage people as big as this wall behind me. But the fact is the complexity gets in the way of execution. So we try to boil it down to simple truths, as you alluded to earlier, that are timely yet timeless. Yes. So as we were looking back in 2004 on what is it that makes organizations, the best teams kind of succeed, really what is it that enables leaders to get what we call discretionary effort, really get their people willing to give their precious time and energy to go above and beyond and help a team. And so my background's in organizational psychology, so I believe that to be a great leader, if you really just love people and understand people, you could be a great leader. So our goal is just to understand the human dynamic. So in that, we just did some research and identified 3 core needs that people need to be met, a leader needs to meet to engage people intellectually. So it's the need for achievement, autonomy, and mastery, right? And so if you meet those needs, you engage people's minds, intellectual engagement. Then on the other side, there are 3 emotional needs. If we meet those needs, we engage people's hearts. We call it emotional engagement. So it's the need for purpose, the need for intimacy, and the need for appreciation. Together, so we engage people's minds, we get performance. We engage people's hearts, we get passion. Together, we call it passionate performance, which is really getting a strong and sustained intellectual and emotional commitment to your work. But that sounds mumbo jumbo. That sounds too PhD-ish, piled high and deep. But so it's really, passionate performance is nothing more than getting discretionary effort from your team. It can't be all about the mind, can't be all about the heart. If it's all about the mind, it becomes a sweatshop, drive. If it's all about the heart, then it's just a party, right? But it's that balance of understanding the full person and meeting those needs. Now, the key is, as a leader, we have to look past the employee to the person to identify those needs. Those needs are not the same. I might not fulfill those needs the same with every person. The need for appreciation on the emotional side, if I had a client do this one time, they said, you know what, I can't believe it. I sent this guy these gift certificates to go see the Dallas blooms, which is great, all these tulips and blooms at the Arboretum. And he didn't realize the guy had allergies, right? So like, you have to understand the person to appreciate people. And in each of these 6 needs I mentioned on either side, we have to make sure that we're meeting those in a way that's authentic to us as a leader, not just like boilerplate. And also in a way that actually meets that need for that particular person. So as an overview, that's what we do.
Like, these are very simple.
Yeah.
Very easy, very obvious, but desperately important for us to pay attention to, which is that people are unique, people are subjective. Sure. And when we come up with a right answer for a solution, and the example you gave, which I think is a great one, which is the recognition of people, the appreciation of people. In my book Fiercely Loyal, one of the things I talked about was that there was a company that were in the Northwest, tech company, and they rewarded everybody who did really great in sales by giving them season tickets to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Great, wonderful. Except there are 2 people standing in the bar, and one of them is a Seahawks fan watching and going, "Isn't it great? We got season tickets. Like, that's a lot of money." They thought, "Wow, they really appreciate this, really recognize this." Meanwhile, the other guy's going, "It sucks." Yeah. Why? I don't like football. Right. I don't like football at all. Right. So this is not a good gift. This is not a good option for me. And I think that so often we don't bother to find out who the person is. Right. We go, "Oh, I'm being a good boss because I do this. Here's my pat on my back for myself." Right. But did I bother to find out who the human was? No. Yeah. That is a problem.
Absolutely. And these needs, they span generations and cultures and geographies. So for example, if I'm managing a baby boomer, I know that person's need for achievement is huge, generally speaking, right? That's big. I want to make sure I'm meeting that need. If I'm managing a millennial, I want to make sure there's plenty of research from Daniel Pink that talks about how their 3 key needs are the need for mastery, autonomy, and appreciation, right? So it's really, and I hate to paint a broad picture of generations, but it does help us see it's all about understanding what is that important to that person. We all have those 6 needs. Let me be clear about that. We all have them, but we have to understand how each person likes to have that need met for me, right? Again,
there's an important point, Lee, and I want everybody to come to is, again, back to this subjectivity, because you can go away from this show and go, okay, these are the 6. If I meet these 3 and I meet these 3, I'm rocking it. Right. Yeah, but the subjectivity is, what does that mean to that person? Right. So, what does achievement mean to me? Yeah. Versus what it means to you over there. Well, you go, well, I gotta hit 100 million in sales, and I go, well, I don't care about that. Yeah. What's achievement to me? Well, achievement to me is that I got these 3 notes back from my clients who said, "Thank you for this and for wonderful service." Right. My need for achievement is recognized. Your need is, so you're thinking I'm a loser, and I'm thinking you're a loser, right? So this is the thing. I think it's really important that I think that leaders fail so often to recognize the subjectivity. And so, again, I want to just put it forward, because what you said is so important. These are the 3 and the 3, but remember, those are labels on a box. That's it. The contents of the box are incredibly subjective, and you as a leader, to be a great leader, have got to shut up, ask questions, and listen. Yeah. We believe that's probably the most powerful yet underutilized leadership tool is just listening. I jokingly used to tell some friends, like, we make a nice living out of going to companies and just listening for them. And then they're like, "Wow, Lee, you're magic. They tell you all this stuff." I'm like, "It's not me. There was just a pent up need. People want to be heard,
And maybe there was someone here that wasn't listening, and so they're willing to tell somebody. But it's very powerful if you can ask the right questions and just listen. And the key is listen with the intent to understand. Don't listen with the intent to respond. And we find that a lot. We're talking, and I do interviews just like you do. And it's like, oftentimes I find myself, okay, I'm not barely listening to the response, and I'm lining up my next follow-up question, right? And the same thing happens in any interaction in life. Or we could be thinking about, gee, I got to bring my dry cleaning home. All kinds of stuff goes on up here, right? Mm-hmm. But really, the gifted people and the gifted leaders really listen to understand. They're watching the whole person. They're reading nonverbals. They're comfortable with silence. They're letting the person process and answer and not just like jumping in. I'm not great about that myself. I tend to talk fast. So if someone doesn't give me a quick response, I repeat the question. And then I realize how stupid of that was of me, right? I just was very condescending to them as if they didn't understand the question. I need to be quiet. And you know what it's like, count to 5 in your head with silence. And it feels like 50 seconds, not 5 seconds. So just letting people respond, giving them some space and air, and then really listening. It sounds, again, so simple, but really very few people really know how to listen with the intent to understand. And then that's very powerful from a leadership perspective. Like, I really get who you are. I get where you're coming from. I get your motivations. Now I can really manage you and lead you more effectively. But really, it's a fairly rare skill that people have developed.
It is. So let's walk through these 3 and 3 for a minute, because sure. I want you to be able to share with our viewers and our listeners what each of them means. I mean, we've just touched on one of each, which was the achievement. That he might think it's $100 million. An achievement for me might be to get 3 notes back. We also touched on appreciation, that, if you give the person tickets to the flower show and the person is allergic, or you give them football tickets and they hate football, this is not smart. Yeah. So let's, I think we've given some good examples there. Let's walk through the others. So let's talk about autonomy, because again, these are definitely some I outlined in Fiercely Loyal, but I want to hear from you, because I think that, it's, again, each one of these, I think, is grossly misunderstood, right? That's why I said superficially simple, with great depth. So let's talk about autonomy. What does autonomy mean in your research, in your work? What does it mean to the employee? Yeah. And what does it need to mean to the employer or to the leader?
Sure. So if you think of achievement as like the what, aligning on what we have to do, what's important to us, autonomy is kind of the how. So people generally want some control over their work. Even in the lowest level jobs, we can give people kind of boundaries and say, within those boundaries, you figure out how to get your job done best. Toyota is a great example of that. They get about over 1 million suggestions, and some research showed over 3 million suggestions from employees per year. Right? Wow. So most of the employees are on the front line, right? And so that tells me, with that many ideas coming through, 2 things are happening. One is the really small ideas, right? And the other thing is 80% of those ideas get implemented. So it tells me the really small ideas, and there's no system in place. The employees have the autonomy to take an idea and just make it happen, right? And so if that could happen on the front line, so imagine if you're managing executives. I mean, so maybe on the front line, the parameters are like this, like here are the guideposts or the fence posts, if you will. And within this, you can lead, you're the leader of your job, figure out the best way to do it, how we improve it, how we tweak it. Minor improvements every day make a huge difference. And that's why Toyota makes a great car, right? And so as we get higher up in an organization, those boundaries might be broader and broader. But the point here is that people want some control over their work. Now, sometimes I'll say that, and like old school leaders will say, well, I don't want them to mess up. I don't want them to go outside the railings or off the reservation and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying to be not judicious about it. There are clear guidelines of quality, of cost control, of service that we have to, put around people, and that's fine. But within that, we often find ourselves sometimes as leaders inadvertently boxing people in smaller than they think. We'll ask employees oftentimes, like, draw a box, and it kind of indicates how much autonomy you have in your job, and it's this big. And then we ask the leader, the leader says, no, it's this big. I'm like, well, something's going on here. You're sending some messages or something that make people feel like I better be safe if I'm in here. And here's the reason we find it most of the time. The leader does not clearly define those boundaries. So if I don't know where the boundary is, generally from a self-preservation standpoint, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to maybe take a baby step here, but I'm not sure what the boundary is, and so I don't want to put myself at risk. And in truth, in the leader's mind, the boundary is 3 feet over rather than 3 inches. So it's really clearly communicating expectations for the job, and what we expect you to do within the boundaries is where we find the biggest gap. Now, once people understand that from their leader, then all of a sudden they're liberated, like, oh wow, I could step over here, I could step over there, I could try this, I could test this new idea out. I didn't even know that before. And again, right back to kind of aligning on expectations. And so that's really, even though it's not so much about autonomy, if you align on the boundaries and where you have control of your job, we'll find people, oftentimes there's a big disconnect. Once they align on it, now they're liberated.
Well, it's one of the things that in my work with leaders that I'll talk about is, are you a parent? And they'll say yes. And I say, are you a helicopter parent? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a bulldozer parent? No.
Yeah.
Are you a good parent? Yeah, I think I'm a good parent. Okay. Yeah. So as a good parent, do you follow your child around and make sure they never bump their head or never, have them in a crash helmet and wrap them in bubble wrap?
Yeah.
No, of course not. Okay. That's called micromanaging. That's what micromanaging is.
Yep.
So in order for your kid to be a well-functioning child, your child has to have the freedom to go out and explore the world and make mistakes and get bumped and hurt. Yeah. Right. Do you understand? Yeah, of course. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, do you let your kid run out into the freeway? No. Why not?
Of course.
Because they get killed. Okay. Yeah. So your kid, do you think your kid knows that? Yeah. Why? Because I've communicated that to him. I told him, don't run out in the road. Okay.
That's right. Perfect.
It's no different. So it's boundaries. And I think that so often we don't have boundaries. We have rules, and rules are different than boundaries. Rules are so restrictive, whereas boundaries are, here's the outer edges, folks. Okay. Do whatever you want inside the in the edges. Be innovative, because rules will strangulate and suffocate innovation. So I think it's a really great point, Lee. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because people, when we talk about this, they start feeling like we're micromanaging. And then that's where we have to draw that distinction between rules and boundaries, like you did. We're trying to give them guidelines. And the whole idea is that people want to feel like they own their work and they have some control over it. And that's a key component of getting ownership behavior, is people feeling like they own the work. We feel responsible, and we feel a sense of ownership for things we help create and solve. And so autonomy enables you to do that. So no rocket science here, but there is science behind it that says
absolutely
the way to do it.
So let's look at mastery, because this is one of the things that I bump into oftentimes in the corporate world is, and I don't like those generalizations either, but I hear them, of course, as do you, which is millennials think they know how to do everything right away. They want a promotion. They want to be in charge of X, Y, and Z because they've worked here for 20 minutes, and they think they've already mastered it, and they already know it, and they're looking for the next thing. So I disagree with that, but I really want to hear from you around, what does mastery mean in the context of both the employee and of the leader in the context of
So mastery is probably one of the most deeply held basic human needs we have. So I was asked this question of our audiences when I speak. I was like, how many attempts does it take a toddler to walk to ultimately master the act of walking, right? And so they'll guess 100, 1,000, whatever. And some will say, depends on if it's a boy or a girl, right? The answer is as many as it takes.
Yes.
Right. So, and it's a great example of how deeply rooted this need for mastery is, that we're just going to keep walking and attempting and bumping our head and tripping until we master the act of walking. And so in the workplace, it's the same thing. We want to feel like we're a master of something, whatever it is in our skill set. And I believe the role of the leader is to really help our team become masters, right? And that's why we're there, to coach them up, not to be a barrier, but to be an enabler of them to do that. And so when people feel good about that and they are achieving, boy, that's great for the leader, man. I'm in heaven. I'd love my people to be masters, right? But it also feels awesome for the people. And it's a self-fulfilling cycle. I've mastered something. Now I could try something new. Maybe I've never even done this before, but I have the confidence to be able to then master that now. So it really is kind of a self-fulfilling cycle. Now, on the other end, if I'm not mastering it and I'm struggling, everyone knows that's not a great feeling. It's not a great feeling for the boss. I'm coaching someone, they're struggling, and it's not a great feeling for the employee. There could be lots of reasons for that. Sometimes they're not well suited for the role. Sometimes they don't have the tools. Many times we find they're just not aligned on the expectations of what needs to happen in the job, right? But that mastery is key. And I hate to paint a broad brush with any generation and stuff. But I tend to be an optimist. So I see this younger generation. I love the fact that they want to be the CEO on their second week of work or whatever it might be. I love that. I'd rather have to rein back an employee with their ambition and their drive than have to kind of push them out. So I tend to tell our leaders to harness that desire to advance. And how can you help them accelerate that?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And one of the things I say is that we also need to understand that we're looking at them through our generational lenses, and we need to look at them through their generational lenses. And
Beautiful.
So what do you mean? My example is very simple. When I first started to speak in the 80s, I did some research, and it was how long does it take a trainee to become a fighter pilot? And it was something like 2.5 years, right? And then in the early 90s, I did the same research again. And it was already down to like 6 months, and
Wow.
Today, technologically, it's about a week.
Holy cow!
Right, because they played games, they grew up with screens.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
My generation didn't grow up with screens. We had a screen. It was called a telly, and you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
up and you had to walk across the room and turn it off, turn it over, change the channel. There was no remotes or anything.
That's right.
I remember my mom and dad getting a telly with a remote. Oh,
No.
wow, how does that work? Right?
We're aging ourselves here. Yeah.
Of course, very old people having a combo here. But the point is that they learn faster because they have the ability to learn faster.
Right.
And I think that we look at them through our lenses and we go, well, you can't learn that in a month. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You don't know how to.
Right.
But why wouldn't you harness the power of somebody who can?
Yeah.
Right, that's like saying, well, this is way too complicated mathematics. Nobody can do it. Well, that is true unless you're a mathematician.
Right.
If you're a mathematician, you go, oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
For me, my smoke's coming out of my ears, my brain is boiling over. But for a mathematician, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the thing. We've got to shift lenses, and I think that's where we fail as leaders, certainly generationally and even subjectively. Is we look through our own lenses, and we've got to really get better at saying, how are they seeing it?
For sure.
Thank you for that. That's a really important piece.
And if I could follow up on that, I think that's what we need to make sure we push our ego aside and let ourselves be a little bit more vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm a seasoned leader, but I don't know how to do that. And so we work with clients on how to create like even reverse mentoring programs on how they're doing some technology initiative. How do we kind of tap into the folks that really understand how to do that? And how do we, and it really starts, it's not about the initiative. It's really about kind of inside out leadership. How do we get the leaders to feel comfortable going, I'm in a leadership position, but I don't know it all. In fact, I know very little, the truth to be told, right? And so how do I get myself to be comfortable with that? And then all of a sudden ideas start flowing and stuff. But if we kind of have this defensiveness and digging in, that doesn't go anywhere too fast.
No, it doesn't. You're absolutely right. Now, moving into, so we've covered the intellectual side of it, the head side of it. Let's go into the heart. We've talked about appreciation. Sure. The center of my work is around purpose and meaning. In everything we do with companies and with individuals around purpose and meaning. I'm really interested to know how you see purpose as it applies in the workforce, as it applies to leadership, and why you believe it's so vitally important.
Yeah. Well, I developed this model in 2004, and purpose was a core component there. And again, I would say human beings haven't changed much in centuries, let alone 10 or 15 years, right? So,
Exactly.
so I'm very pleased to see that the market, particularly like the corporate board, has come out and made these statements about, the purpose of a corporation is not just to generate revenue, right? It's to help the community and help its shareholders and with a greater sense of purpose, leading the way with purpose. So we believe now, not believe, we just see this in the market, that there's kind of two components to purpose. One is there a sense of purpose in my work? Right. So, the old story about the three guys laying bricks, right? And the one guy says I'm laying bricks. And the other guy says I'm building a wall. The other guy says I'm building a place of worship, right? So I believe as a leader, our role is to be a bridge builder. In other words, a bridge builder between today's tasks and toils, no matter how routine the task might be, and some bigger tomorrow. So they could see some connection, some real purpose on how they help the human condition and how they make the world a better place, no matter how menial the work might seem. So purpose-driven, job-based purpose is critical. But then now, more recently, we're seeing that people are they want to go work for companies that are purpose-driven themselves, right? Yeah, I want my work to be purposeful, but I want to make sure our organization is doing what it can to serve the community, to make a difference in the world, to make sure we're being sustainable, and all those are all right. Those are all good things. But we find that as a critical kind of filter, particularly for newer workers coming into the workforce, which, by the way, are the majority of the workforce now, right? The millennial generation. So, but more and more, they're like sensitized. That's a real filter for them as they're looking like, is this company making a difference? Is this company doing something that I don't really believe in or I don't feel is helping the world? So I think there are two levels of purpose there. But as the leader for this particular model, the primary focus is on the purpose of the job and making sure people, and what we'll hear leaders say is, well, I told the guy, here's how he makes a difference. I was like, well, you can't just tell him once. I mean, that's something that's ongoing. I have a client showed me a great story one time. She was in college washing dishes at a hospital. She went and interviewed for a job, got the job, and the boss said, you know what, our purpose at this hospital is to help our patients get healthy as quickly as possible so they can go back with their loved ones and their families. You help achieve that purpose by washing the dishes with high quality and with high speed, right? Yeah. So he led with the broader purpose and then tied it into what she did. And he said he would come back and do that every week to remind her, right? So I think as a leader, that never ends. It's always connecting to the bigger purpose of their job and then ultimately to the organization. So, and that talk about getting discretionary effort, that's where people are going, hey, I'm making a difference here. That's where you get people thinking about new ideas and better ways to do things. That's just a huge kind of a trigger for people kind of getting outside themselves and thinking a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we run a program called the Authentic Speaker Academy for Leadership. And one of the things I talk about with that is that if you come to love speaking and you come to really enjoy it and you're standing on the stage and you're delivering your message, and that's wonderful, and people will look at you and see the glamour of that.
Yeah.
Right. And if you haven't found your purpose in going up to speak,
right,
you will be worn down by packing bags, dragging your ass to an airport, going through TSA, waiting, getting on cramped planes, eating airplane food, getting off at the other hand, and not sleeping in your own bed, sleeping in hotel beds, not eating what it is you want, missing your family, all that will wear you down. Yeah. But if you're on purpose, it won't bother you at all, because, and this is one of my quotes, is that there are no menial tasks for a person who is on purpose.
That's right. I love it.
There are things that'll feel menial for a moment, and then you go, but this is driving to that greater outcome, which is, as you said, is you wash the dishes properly, please, because you're saving a life.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I love that. And thank you for bringing that to absolute clarity for us.
Yeah. So I think the why, if your why is strong enough, you can deal with any what you have to do, and which is really just a different way of saying what you're saying. But I think people don't spend enough time really getting their head around what is even for me, what is the biggest purpose? Why am I doing this? But if you could really be grounded in that every day, the what's, you could look at a menial task as a blessing versus something that's going to bog you down. But
absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about this final piece in these three, which is intimacy. And I think that this, I wanted to leave this to the last on purpose.
Okay.
Because I think that certainly people in our generation are terrified of this one. I mean, I think that this one's more terrifying than any of them.
Yeah.
Because we grew up with this, what I think is a silly idea, that there is a separation between work and life.
Right.
That, you know, I leave my work self there and I go home. Ask your wife, when you've had a bad day at work, you don't leave it at work.
Yeah. Right.
You think you do, but you don't.
Yeah.
And if you've had a fight with your partner at home and you go to work, there's a pretty good chance that's going with you too. So we have this idea, this preference that there's a home self and a work self, and that intimacy belongs at home, and that should never go to work. And I am with you, Lee, in that I believe that this is profoundly important. We do enormous work around this with our clients and with the C-suite individuals we work with around building that level of intimacy. I want you to talk to me about what you see as this need for intimacy, and how do we bring it forward in a way that doesn't scare the Jesus out of the executives that you're bringing it forward to. Right?
You know, I debated whether to use that term when we developed the model.
I'm sure.
A gentleman named McClellan years ago developed this need for affiliation, which is kind of the same thing. It's really about being connected, but I chose to use that label to just capture people's attention, because it really is. People do want to feel connected. They want to feel there's an intimacy at work. You know, Gallup's Q12 survey, like one of the key questions is in there is, do you have a best friend at work, right? Which is telling us that people want to feel that connection. So I think as organizations, as leaders, like structure, I think Amazon used to have like a 2 pizza rule. Like their teams were never bigger than enough that they couldn't serve 2 pizzas to and serve the team, right? So they understand that you can't just have these huge teams, but it's not just about size. It's about, am I creating like rituals that bind people, special rituals? People, even a weekly staff meeting is actually a ritual, and many leaders don't take advantage of it. How do they start the meeting off? Do we do a high and a low from last week? Like, what was good? What was bad? Tell me about your life. I mean, there are lots of ways we can kind of create rituals. We believe rituals are really a key component to creating the sense of intimacy. So we're big on starting meetings with a high and a low, whether it's a personal high, a personal low, or business, before each meeting. It gives you a great window on what's going on with the team. It gives you a chance to lift up a team member if they're struggling, or applaud them. So that people crave that. They crave appreciation. They crave intimacy. They crave connectedness. And ironically enough, in the most connected world we've ever lived in, we are also the most disconnected we've ever been as human beings, right? So people at home may feel very disconnected. When they come to work, it's a chance for them to feel like, I belong to something. And it's not an easy challenge, because now we have more telecommuting, more remote work and all of that. And so it's not like we all just see each other every Monday morning or throughout the week. So as a leader, we have to be more intentional about leveraging technology to make sure people are connected, and reaching out to them, understanding who they are, appreciating them, doing these other things that create human connection with people. But people crave that. And I believe it's the root of much of the evil, if you will, that we see in the world today, all the shootings and all that stuff. You read the profile on these people and these perpetrators, and it's all very same. They're all very disconnected, right? And so I just think we have a responsibility as a leader to make people feel connected, but it's self-serving, because when they feel connected, then they're giving us more discretionary effort. They're looking out for their buddies, and they're trying to help them out. We become a team, right? And there's great power in that.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that intimacy is a basic human need, and we are seeing that there is a loneliness epidemic that causes immensely dysfunctional behavior that's not societally positive. Let's just use that word for now. And there is nothing more powerful than having somebody get you, have a sense of you, and sometimes that is the ability to hear you when you're in struggle.
Right.
But we are so caught up in this externalized world of surface stuff, with Instagram and Facebook and whatever it is, and we go, oh well, look, Lee's always happy and he's having a great time and his family's happy, and lives in this nice house, and they were carving a turkey at Thanksgiving and they had all the nice photographs. Yeah, that's not real. That's a snapshot of a 24-hour. The fact that the daughter was upset about this, or the son was upset about that, or you said something stupid, not because you're an ass, but because that's what we do as humans. We don't take a full perspective. I am an amazing husband, except when I'm an idiot, which is a lot of the time. Sometimes I'm just an idiot, and sometimes I just say stuff and I go, oh my God, got me just, hold on a second, I got to wipe my shoes because they've been in my mouth, I mean, it's just part of the human condition.
That's right. Yeah.
But we live in this world of we're so externalized, and so because we're externalized, we actually get more and more and more superficial.
Right.
And coming back and owning, and this is why I think the power of vulnerability is so important. And again, we talked about it in Fiercely Loyal, but getting to that power of vulnerability, which is what you talked about in the high lows, which is, listen, this was my low for the week. What? Well, me and the wife had a scrap on the weekend, and I was really stupid. I did something. I was thoughtless. I was wrong, and I feel really bad because I love my wife deeply. I'm not asking anybody here to do anything about that. I just want you to know that weighed heavily on me on Sunday. We're good now. We met Sunday night. We're good. Okay, right. Then somebody else will come up to you at the coffee break and say, you know what, I get it, because my husband was really stupid on the weekend, and he did this and he said that, and I felt really bad, but I kind of get where your wife was coming from, or I get where your husband was coming from. And I think that is so powerful, because now I want to go and work with you because I feel a connection to you.
That's right.
It's really important. Thank you for sharing that, Lee. I think it's
my pleasure. If I could share a quick illustration around that. I was at a client. We were developing this model, and it was a retailer, and I was at their distribution center, and a young guy was giving me a quick tour, and as he's showing me kind of the loading dock, this guy's getting ready to the truck's getting ready to leave, and this guy runs over. He goes, oh, he beckons the truck back. And he goes, wait a minute. And he opens up the back of the truck, gets out a broom, and he sweeps it out. He goes, okay, good to go. Gives him the thumbs up, and the truck's off and running. So I'm curious. I said, hey, so I asked the guy, why did you do that? I'm just curious. Is that part of your normal process? He goes, no, my buddy Brian, who used to work here at the distribution center, is working out at the store now. And that truck was going to the store, and he just had a new baby, and I know he hasn't been sleeping much. He's having it tough. So I thought if I could make it a little easier for him and sweep out the truck before it got to the store, it might help him out a little bit. Like, that's the power of intimacy and connection. Little acts of what you might call heroism every day happen with teams that are really connected and know who each other are like that. So
that's a great
it's very
point,
powerful.
Because if there was no intimacy there, truck's gone.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's gone.
Right.
And I love that, because that, as you said, people, companies and leaders are often afraid of intimacy, and they don't realize that it just makes a more profitable organization. It makes a far more well-oiled machine too.
Yeah.
Lee, we're moving towards the end of the show, and I want to ask you some questions that I think are important, because I first of all, I don't believe that leadership is a result. I think it's an ongoing process. And as we just talked about, it's a process that involves a good deal of failure. And oftentimes that failure is in the place of not knowing better, or knowing better but not actually taking the appropriate action. Please share with us, so that our listeners, our viewers, have a sense of this, something that you did for a long time that you actually thought was, maybe at the time thought was very good, but it actually blocked you from the levels of success that you've been able to achieve now.
The one that comes to mind that I'm still working on is that I like to serve people, I like to help them, and I like to listen. I love learning about people, and so only my best friends would say this back to you before, like they would really kind of call me on it. but I like asking questions, and they say, oh, so Lee, so tell me about your family. I say, no, wait, I want to learn more about this. So I keep asking and asking. And I thought I was being like interested and selfless, but really if you want to be in a relationship, that was actually being selfish, because I wasn't revealing anything of myself. I wasn't being vulnerable to them. So I was happy to have them be vulnerable to me and help them and all that, but I wasn't allowing it to be balanced. And so I thought about whether it's my clients, but mostly just my friends and my colleagues and my partners, that I needed to work on me being vulnerable. And that's part of having a balanced relationship. And I always thought it was me being a good, selfless guy, but the truth is I was being selfish. And so it's something I still have to work on today. And I fortunately have good friends around me that call me on it. I call them best friends, BEST, buddies who encourage success and truth. And I think we all should have kind of a group of our best team around us and kind of push back. And like you, I believe a best friend, someone is willing to tell you what you really don't want to hear, but they tell it to you to build you up, not to break you down. And so I've got some of those around me, fortunately, to kind of help me work on that. That's mine.
And that's great. And that's a great lesson, I think, for so many of us. That a lot of the time we tell ourselves we're being a good, nice, whatever the horrible word is that we put in front of that person, when really we don't even, and this is important to recognize, we don't even know that we're actually manipulating. We don't even know that we're being selfish. And because on the surface it looks good. It looks good, right? But you know, what is going on with you? Well, you know, I'm really struggling with this. You know, for me, you know, I'm the guy who takes care of others. I'm this, you know, and that's a challenge, right? But for me, so I get it. If we are driven to take care of others, then that's where we go. And it is difficult to say, okay, well, here's what's going on for me, and here's how I feel about that, and to let that guard down. You know, so it's not about being tough. It's actually, and so that's why a lot of times it will get missed. So I think it's a really great point. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So pleasure. What was the turning point for you where you, you know, I think there's a turning point for all of us as leaders, when we realize, you know, for me, literally, it was falling on my head off a mountain. It's not one I recommend for people. But often I find that there is a turning point for people in their lives when they realize whatever it is I was doing, I can't do that anymore. I have to change direction. What was the turning point for you?
I think in my last corporate job, before I started this business, I was an executive, and I started to realize that that might not be the highest and best use of my skills. That even though, like, everyone would kind of want to, you know, climb the corporate ladder and get to that point, I realized I'm probably had some gifted areas in helping others and coaching them and consulting and writing that I maybe would better serve the world to shift that direction. So that's when I went out on my own, and then we were consulting for a couple of years. And then another turning point was that I wrote an article, and maybe, I don't know, 750 words, 1,000 words, and a friend of mine said, Tim Durkin said, Lee, you need to turn this into a book. And I said, Tim, look at that. That's like almost 1,000 words, buddy. That's all I got, right? And so that's where I bumped into. Later. Right. So that's where I bumped into my friend David Cottrell I met earlier, and I saw one of his books in a client. It was a nice little thin book. I was like, maybe I could write one of those. So I went to lunch with David, and 90 days later, I had my first book out, and so that just kind of started a new path for me too. So
that's awesome. That's wonderful.
But again, those defining moments, sometimes it could be introspection, but it also could be someone else stirring us on to help us see our life or our gifts a little bit differently.
Well, someone who is a BEST friend.
There you go. There you go.
I think it's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What's a guilty pleasure for Lee?
Guilty pleasure for me is really, I'm a pretty family guy, so I just love having some time with our kiddos. They're grown now, they're away, so to be able to have them and go to a special place. We were up in your neck of the woods this past summer, up Seattle, Vancouver, Whistler, and just enjoying, exploring new cultures, new locations, and new experiences. My wife's great about family rituals, so just doing something new together, whether it's going skydiving or just something crazy. We're not super daredevils, but just something different. So shared experiences with our family to kind of create those bonds of intimacy is really my guilty pleasure. I love that. I love the arts and all that kind of stuff too, but family is not a close second to my family though.
What makes Lee cry?
Usually something about related to our kids. It could be a pride cry, being proud about something your kids did, or it could be a shared cry of your kids being in pain around something. I have a ritual with our family where I write letters from dad for special occasions, graduations, birthdays, Christmas, so that everyone gets a letter from dad. And my wife gets a letter from Lee. And those are times where I could just either write a blessing or a story or something to encourage them or whatever it might be. Nothing fancy, but some of those are pretty touching. In fact, when we were in Austria last year, we were sitting in a place where my dad was 75 years before, fighting in World War II.
Wow.
And I was lucky enough to have his dog tags, and I was able to, in that letter, pass those dog tags on to my son. I barely got through that letter. That was a rough one, but those are all good, positive
What was that like for your son?
I think it was equally emotional. It was it was a special moment for the whole family. It was fun. Yeah.
How old is your son when you gave it?
He was 25 when I gave it to him. So so anyway, I always talk about I would never have the life I have. My kids wouldn't have the life they have if my dad, like many of the greatest generation that came from abroad and built this country, didn't make tons of sacrifices for, make personal sacrifices for himself, his family, and future generations. And so I always want to make sure our kids feel connected to that and have an appreciation for why they have what they have and why they have the opportunities they have now is because someone maybe they never knew but made tremendous sacrifice.
And where is your heritage from, Lee? Where is your...
My dad's side's from Italy. He was actually born in New York, but when he was 7, he went back to Italy like many immigrants did then. They make a little money, go back to the homeland. And so when he was 14, he had a choice to either become a priest and stay in Italy or come back to the United States. And so he got in Sturridge class on a boat there, and he got disconnected from his dad when he went through security, and his dad ended up getting a rowboat and waving with a little handkerchief, Pietro, Pietro, he remembers waving to his dad, and that was the last time he ever saw his dad. His dad passed away after that, so he came into the Ellis Island into New York and built a life for himself. He, back in the icebox days, he delivered blocks of ice to apartment buildings 2 at a time, go to the front, the roof, deliver one, jump to the next building, he'd get a running start, deliver the next one. And I always wondering why he had bald shoulders, because he had ice blocks, he delivered, and he had cantaloupe-sized calves because he would climb up the stairs and jump across the building. But I feel very grateful that he did that, but also
to a whole nother level.
That's right.
Your dad was the originator of real.
Right. I like that. But I really appreciate. I also appreciate the fact that he actually wrote a manuscript before he passed away to kind of share his whole life story. So we have some of those things that can be passed down to the family. So that was real special.
So he wrote a manuscript. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Was that published, or was it just for the family?
Just really for the family. I've used a couple excerpts in our own blog to kind of make points about perseverance or sacrifice and stuff. So it's been a fun gift for the family, though.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing that. That was very intimate. I appreciate that. It was wonderful. Lee, before we go, I would love for you to share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you and all your wonderful resources. But before I do that, I want to ask you to leave our listeners, our viewers, with one piece of practical advice that they can implement ASAP, preferably within the next 24 hours, that they can, because information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from the application of what it is that you've shared. So how would they best apply this practically in the next 24 hours?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit broad, but I would say you have to get your mind right before you can get your team right. So it's really your mindset of, am I looking at my team as people that are really successful, that could be great, that could make a difference, or do I have kind of a negative mindset toward them? So I would just say, check your mindset, maybe have one of your best friends, VEST, kind of check your mindset around that. I just think that's really critical. We believe in leadership from the inside out. And so if you can think about what your assumptions are about an employee, about their capabilities, about your team, test your assumptions, because negative assumptions will play out in negative behaviors and reactions, and positive assumptions will do the reverse. But I very simply, as it relates to the model we just spoke about, Dov, they could actually go online and take a simple assessment around that. But I would just say, look at those needs: achievement, autonomy, mastery. What am I doing every day to kind of help my team meet that need? And on the emotional side, purpose, intimacy, and appreciation. Can I do one thing to kind of elevate my game and better meet the needs of my team in one of those areas? Just one baby step. You don't have to take one for each of the 6 needs. Just pick one of them and see, how can I just elevate my game 1% a day in those areas? You'll start seeing the difference pretty quickly.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and honor.
My
Please
pleasure.
tell
Thank you,
our
Dov.
viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources, please, Lee.
Sure. They could go to the lgroup.com. It's the word the, THE, the letter L, and then group, the lgroup.com. Also, you could just text the word leadership to 444-999 and get access to lots of stuff. On our website, there's a tab for free tools, lots of self-assessments, video clips, top 10 lists, all kinds of stuff out there to help you elevate your game.
So let's slow that down, because you did speak fast.
So I didn't do that.
The lgroup.com.
Right.
So that's one. And the other was the text. What was the text?
Right. You can text the word leadership to 444-999.
So text the word leadership to 444-34-999.
You got it.
Perfect. 3 4s and 3 9s.
Yep.
Fantastic. We will make
Cool.
sure that those go into the show notes so that people can grab those. It's been a pleasure and honor having you here, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your time
I appreciate
and your energy with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. It has genuinely been a pleasure. Thank you for that. And for you, dear listener, remember you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes in our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. And remember, if you're ready to develop your leadership and your loyalty in your organization, then come also talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where you can find out more about hiring me, Dov Barron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization by simply going to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. Full Monty Leadership, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And I want to thank our guest, Lee Colin, for today, for being with us and for all of his wisdom that he shared. And again, you can find out more about Lee by going to thelgroup.com. And there's all kinds of great stuff there. And believe me, there's a lot of books and a lot of great material. I know, because they're on my bookshelf. I've got them. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can take a look at each one of those 6, 3 for the mind, 3 for the heart needs, and how you can serve the people that you serve better, create a greater bond with them to become a better leader and create more loyalty. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.